I'm joined by Aidan Johnson of the band Break the Rules. Go and check out my previous interview with him. In this one, I started by asking him what's changed since the last one.
Not a massive amount has changed. I guess things have evolved, I suppose. Like my band Break the Rules have evolved. We've done a lot more gigs with John Cogan, so I suppose that relationship has somewhat evolved. And also I've been to lots of Quo gigs this year. Well, 4 gigs. Of course, last year the band weren't touring. I think at the time when I last spoke to you, we weren't quite certain what the future of the band would hold. We weren't quite sure. Like gigs hadn't started to be announced, sort of the rumours weren't sort of present in terms of what the band's activity for this year might be. And yeah, it's turned out to be I think a fairly successful year for the band. And yeah, it's been nice to follow them, nice to go to the gigs. And yeah, I've enjoyed it a lot more this time compared to the Out Quo in tour, I think.
Why would you say that was? What was different about it?
For me, I much prefer outdoor gigs. I think they're just more fun. The gigs in 2022, they're all indoors or fully seated. And yeah, I just think there's a better atmosphere at the outdoor gigs. I do think the band were tighter as well. I thought they were really tight, really on fire. Compared to some of the outgrowing gigs. Not that the band were bad, but I think naturally, every band after such a long break because of the pandemic, they sort of took them a while to find their feet again. But this year it really felt like Quo had found their feet, even though they had sort of taken a year off. Last year they didn't do anything, but yeah, I just enjoyed them more. I had a really fun time, and yeah, I suppose in the back of my head, well, in all of our heads, there was that sort of feeling this might be the last time. So I suppose that somewhat makes it a bit more special. Sort of feels like there's a reason to celebrate and commemorate, because we don't know if we'll be doing it again.
But even though it may have been the last time, I mean, the Quo fandom still goes on because Break the Rules are playing at the Quovention next year alongside a number of excellent Quo tribute bands.
Yeah, I think the Quo tribute scene is as strong as it has been, for several years, and there's still these events happening. Like the Quovention, there's been the Rock Till You Drop Day, and there's various events across Europe, which I don't think show any signs of stopping just because Status Quo themselves are retiring from touring. So yeah, it's nice to still be a part of that sort of tribute community with Break the Rules. And yeah, there's still people out there who love the music, who love seeing the tribute bands, and who want to have a good time with Quo's music.
Indeed. You obviously, as we've mentioned, are playing with Break the Rules at the moment. You've done quite a lot with John Cogan, as you say. What's that been like? Because obviously you drummed for John Cogan's Quo. I mean, how is it being on the other side of it, as it were?
It's really nice to have John affiliated with Break the Rules. We're honoured to have him just as a friend of the band, really. He's so kind and supportive of what we do, and I think he genuinely loves seeing people of our generation keeping the music going. And also it's nice for him to have an opportunity to get behind the drum kit and still play on a couple of tracks. The 2 that he's done with us most frequently, In My Chair and April Spring. And he plays those, terrifically. Like his technique is quite sublime on those, I think. And it goes without saying he knows what he's doing, obviously, because he recorded the original drum tracks. But no, it's really quite special to have him on board, and sort of have him, like I say, just as a friend, really. He really is so kind. We do our best to celebrate him, to celebrate his input to Quo and his time with Quo. He's always really accommodating to what we want to do as a band, and he's just I think he genuinely is thrilled to be a part of it and to join us, and it's a thrill for us to have him.
Are you planning to do anything else with him next year at gigs?
We have a few things in the diary. I'm not sure if they're all announced yet, but yeah, we do have a few gigs lined up with him in London, in Wolverhampton. So yeah, we're at the Robin twice next year, once with the Quovention at the start of the year, and then we're going back sort of later in the year. I think it's actually on John's birthday as well in September. So that'd be a special night. Then yeah, the Half Moon in Putney. And then we'll be rounding off the year with a big gig with him in Whitney. I think that's next November. So we've got a few gigs planned in with him next year. And that'd be really good. That'd be the whole, be the full Break the Rules show, but then with John coming on and off, sort of he'll guest on a few numbers. We're looking forward to those. And I think now we've sort of trialed it, we've sort of got a better idea of sort of how the show can work, sort of what songs John can play, what songs he wants to play as well, because we've done a couple of rehearsals with him and he's tried out a few different songs now. So we just want to put on a really good show as we always endeavor to do. And John will be a part of that. So excited to what next year holds, really. And like I say, sort of now we've got the plans firmed up with the gigs, getting them confirmed in the calendar. It's it's nice to be thinking about set lists and just doing whatever we can to put on the best show possible. And give people a good time of Quo.
Well, we've swum around next year. Let's have a little dive into this year a little bit, because you actually went over to the States to play in Memphis, didn't you, at Sun Studios?
Yes, I did indeed. So with Dan and Lewis from Break the Rules, and then also Adam, our good friend Adam Beer. So it was, it's sort of a holiday we've always wanted to do. Dan's been over before, but so we were obviously going to go over and do Memphis and Nashville. I'm not quite sure how it came about, but there was an opportunity, if you want, for people to be able to record at Sun Studios in Memphis. So we kind of explored that, and looked into if it was feasible. And it turned out it was. Sort of the dates aligned, and it just kind of worked out with when we were available and when we were going to be in Memphis. We went for it. We did it. And it was really quite superb. I'm not often one for sort of these corny things when people say, oh, you can, there's something special about X building or X location, or there's something magical about certain room. I think a lot of that's bollocks most of the time. But actually with Sun Studios, there really is something special about it. It's really quite something, and it's all still incredibly original. It's not like sort of, I think I was going to say Trigger's Broom, sort of where it's had a new head and a new handle. It's not like that. It's still really authentic, I suppose is the word. And it's a really magical place to be. So so we did a session there one evening. We went along and recorded I think 5 or 6 tracks. And of course we did a few Quo songs. So we did Spinning Wheel Blues, Blue Eyed Lady, and Bloodhound, which is not technically a Quo track, but a Quo cover. Our version was the Quo'd up version. We love playing that song. So that was really good. That was really cool. And we are in the process of getting them mixed properly, and I think there may be a little release of that sometime next year maybe. But it was really special to record there, and also to play some Quo as well, because as you probably know, Quo aren't big in the States. They never made it there. Very few people have sort of heard of them and know the songs. So we went in, and we hadn't really rehearsed. Well, we hadn't rehearsed with Adam, but I still feel like we did a pretty good job of the songs. And it was nice just to get the reaction of sort of the studio manager and the engineer. It's sort of, I guess for them it's kind of it's rock and roll music, but just kind of understand this sort of power and punchiness that Status Quo has. And sort of I started talking to the studio manager about Status Quo and sort of what the band mean to us. And it was kind of quite nice to share that with people who have no idea about Quo. And it's strange because over here, they're in the UK or throughout Europe, they're kind of such a big part of rock history. Sort of they've just sort of been fairly, they've been a constant in the musical landscape for the last nearly 60 years. But in America, that isn't the case whatsoever. So it kind of felt quite nice. We could have almost pretended that they were our original songs and that we were an original band, because that's how unknown the songs were. But doing the recording was great. We didn't play anything in Nashville, of course. They don't. Nashville doesn't just let anyone get up and play songs, of course. It's the creme de la creme of musicians there. So that was cool.
Let's move on to something I like to do called milestones. Haven't done this for a while, and if you're listening or watching this, I'd love to have you on the Quo-Cast in the new year. We can perhaps do this, and it'll be a completely different set of albums. Just give us kind of concise opinion on the albums I'm about to say the name of. So there are albums celebrating their milestones this year, their 10s and their 5s. Are you familiar with Spare Parts at all?
Yeah, I'm familiar with it.
Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on it?
It's not really my cup of tea. I think, I think Quo were probably a little bit lost in that period. It's not really Quo. It doesn't have the magic of that first album, of the Matchstickable Messages album. It doesn't sort of have that, that sort of really, really raw psychedelic sort of magic to it. It's just quite a meh album. It doesn't do anything for me. It's not one I listen to regularly. I just don't think the songs are very Quo in any sense. I know sort of they weren't on the first album either, but they just, for me, it didn't seem like a band. I think there's a lot of string arrangements and a lot of sort of additional bits to it, a lot of other parts, you could say, if you get the pun. I think I would probably rank it the worst Quo album. I'm not saying it's bad, but just in the sense that it's not one that I ever choose to listen to, really.
When compared to everything else in the catalogue, basically.
Yeah, basically. It just doesn't, I just don't think, if it doesn't have any significance whatsoever, or not even to the extent that if, let's say, that album didn't exist, or it was banned, or you just could never listen to it, nobody would give a shit, really. Nobody would care. Like, it's not, I don't think it holds much value. Sorry if I've offended anyone who actually really likes that album.
Okay, what about 1974 Quo album?
I really love that. You probably can't see it in shot. I've got the vinyl framed up on the wall there. I think it's certainly Alan's strongest album. I think, notably Backwater and Just Take Me opening, and Drifting Away as well. And of course Slow Train at the end of the album, which is kind of just mega. I think it's Quo. I'm not quite sure. I'd love to know exactly sort of what else they would have been listening to around that time that would have inspired them to sort of do that, sort of longer track like Slow Train with all the different components to it. I know sort of the obvious go-to is perhaps Pink Floyd, but I'm not quite sure if they were in sort of their peak era, a few years before sort of the Wall album. But yeah, there's obviously maybe perhaps sort of prog rock. I'm not quite sure what inspired Quo to do that, but a really strong album. I think total opposite to Spare Parts. It holds a huge sort of place of significance in the Quo history. I think without that album, it's sort of where did it sit? So 74, so it was after Hello, four on the Level. Would that have been next? Yeah, so it's I think I'm right in saying the album went straight to number one. Like, it's one of those.
It's number two, actually. Number two.
Did it only reach number two?
Yeah.
Oh, right. Okay. Interesting. But it was during that period where Quo just couldn't do anything wrong. I think everything from Pile Driver up to perhaps, Blue for You, sort of that 5-year period was just magnificent. Quo could do no wrong. I don't think there's a single bad track on that album or any of those albums from that time.
Okay. 1979, Whatever You Want album. What are your thoughts on it?
I really like it. My favorite track is High Flyer. I saw Stated Quo doing that song at one of the pre-gigs they were doing for the Hammersmith reunion gigs in 2013 or 14, one of them. I just fell in love with that track, High Flyer, great track from Alan. Overall it's a strong album. I think it was it seemed like sitcom the year after If You Can't Stand the Heat, and I know that was received to sort of mixed opinions, well, as was the Rockin' All Over the World album, because it was slightly different production. If You Can't Stand the Heat seems sort of like they were trying, especially with like the female backing vocals, had sort of a different production. Whatever You Want felt like a bit of a return to form, sort of a bit, I don't want to say raw, but it certainly sounds more like the correct sort of mix and production for Quo, which they perhaps didn't get right on the previous couple of albums. It's an excellent album, interesting cover, and of course, led with the single Whatever You Want, which is sort of, well, I think it's safe to say Quo's biggest hit. That's an original composition, because of course they didn't write Rockin' All Over the World.
Indeed. What about Perfect Remedy, 1989?
It's okay. It's okay. I think the singles from it are were extremely forgettable. Little Dreamer and Not at All. Not at All. Was that one of the
Yeah.
singles? Yeah. I think they're two quite sort of forgettable singles. So no surprise they didn't. I don't think they even charted because I've never seen them on a compilation. They weren't sort of on the Pictures Hits compilation. But it's a great period for the band. Like they were sounding on fire by that point because John and Jeff had I think found their feet in the band. Sort of that, as a 5-piece, they were really rocking around that time. I mean, one of my favorite live recordings is from the Perfect Remedy tour. I think it's that with the Rockin' All Over the Years release. I'm trying to think, what was it at the NEC in '89? But yeah, so that was the Perfect Remedy era where the band were absolutely great. They were on fire. They were sounding so good. I think it's the best that lineup sounded. But the 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 recordings didn't reflect that. I don't think. I just I don't think the album's awful. It's just the songs aren't great. It's not a strong selection of compositions. But it does have the power of rock on, I believe, which is mega. Is almighty track. Again, I was watching the live recording of that just the other day, actually, from that NEC gig on that tour, and yeah, that's a superb song. But yeah, the rest of the album is again quite forgettable. I think it's probably down there with Spare Parts on my ranking.
Well, I'm going to put the next two albums in these milestones into one, so you can kind of comment as like an overall 90s thing. Thirsty Work and Under the Influence, which of course are 25 and 30, not necessarily in that order, but celebrate a milestone this year.
Yeah, two very different albums, actually. Two really different albums, considering they're kind of from the same era, but also a time when Quo went through change, I suppose. So I think I'm with the two key differences in not of course sonically, different album, different songs, of course, but the two key things that stand out for me, I believe it was the last album that Bernie Frost was writing with Francis. I think I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that was towards the end, sort of the last one where he sort of had a heavy influence on the songwriting. And also it was the last album that it was the last album before Quo brought in Mike Paxman to produce, because I think Under the Influence was his first production. And I'm a big fan of his production, actually. I thought the sound that he had for Under the Influence and then Heavy Traffic and the subsequent albums that he worked on was spot on. I thought it was really good. It sort of was, Thirsty Work is perhaps a little bit, not overproduced, but overmixed. I think it's the mix of it isn't quite right. Whereas Under the Influence is, a lot more like Quo as a band in the studio, sort of really rocking. But yeah, Thirsty Work is not a bad collection of songs. Again, I think the single choices of I think I Didn't Mean It and Sherry Don't Fail Me Now weren't perhaps the right choices. I'm not sure they weren't the strongest songs, but perhaps they were right for the musical landscape at the time. And it's also quite a Francis heavy album. I don't believe Rick has many songs in there at all. I can only think of Queenie.
He's got one vocal on there, one lead vocal.
Is that it? One. Again, I'd love to know why is that? Did he just not have anything good to bring to the table, or was it Francis? Like it was. I know it was around the time Francis did his first solo album, so maybe sort of he was just in
a couple of years afterwards.
Yeah, so maybe he was just sort of in a not self-centered mode, but focusing on that. But no, Under the Influence, a much stronger album. I really like that. Great songs from all the band on there. And Little White Lies, beautiful track. I think that was released as a single. It didn't chart, I don't think. Then a random cover of Not Fade Away at the end, which I don't quite get. I feel like that. I'm not saying it spoils the album, but it just seems a bit random why they chucked a sort of a cover on there.
Well, it was included on a Mike Batt project that Quo were part of.
Was, yes.
And they obviously decided to include it without the orchestral arrangement on the album. So it makes sense. So they've done sort of things like that before where they were doing something for another project, and it makes sense just to stick it on the album. It's recorded content, isn't it, that they can use?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. But no, it's not a bad cover. But no, the rest of the album I think is really good. And I think it probably should. I think as an album, I prefer it to Heavy Traffic because people sort of Heavy Traffic was sort of was a bit of a turning point, I suppose, with it being in the new century and with Matt Letley on drums as well. But I think Under the Influence was sort of for me that comes before as sort of the return to form. I think with Mike Paxman's production, as I've already said, and sort of a much stronger set of songs that are much more suited for Quo, sort of a little less sort of keyboard heavy and sort of the sort of 90s sort of sound which they had on Thirsty Work. I feel like Under the Influences, yeah, I think it holds more significance, but people seem to always refer to Heavy Traffic as the album with sort of, I don't know, that was the turning point, but I think Under the Influence was quite a turning point. It's a shame they ruined it with Famous in the Last Century afterwards.
Yes, well, that's next year. I've got to talk about that at length. Right,
Yeah,
so
look forward to that.
there are other milestones in there, but we'll move on because we're running out of time here. As it comes up, we're running out of time, and it makes me think of that track from Backbone, which is one of the milestones this year. You've got upcoming gigs with Break the Rules. You've got the last one of the year coming up, haven't you?
Indeed, we do. Yes. So yeah, in just a few weeks' time, we're going to be playing in Swindon on 23rd of November. A really nice club called the Colview Club. We played there last year as part of this music festival weekend they have. So yeah, we're going to be going back to our own headline gig. Really looking forward to that. It'd be nice to play a proper gig. I mean, we've not gigged in quite a while, and when we have sort of over the summer, it's a lot of festivals. So you're doing a shorter set, it's sort of mainly just the greatest hits. And they're always quite sort of quick get on, get off, quick turnarounds. It's nice to do our own show, where we're playing a longer set. We can play a few different songs as well. And also, yeah, we can get a perfect sound where we're using all our own gear. So I'll be looking forward to that because yeah, we had a few good festival gigs, but I don't think we're on our best form. We were slightly under rehearsed because Dan, our guitarist, had a bit of an injury. We had to have a stand-in for one gig, and then we weren't rehearsed for the next one, so they sort of weren't our best. But I'm really looking forward to us going out at the Swindon gig, ending the year on a high, and yeah, putting on a good show.
You wanted to mention about the Archive series. What's been your thoughts on the Archive series that they've been releasing?
I've really liked them. I've really enjoyed it. I was actually kind of not saying I seem to know stuff in the Quo world before it's announced, but often sort of there's always rumors or I hear something, I see something. This, when it was first announced, when the first one, the Amsterdam one, was announced back, I think it was last summer, that kind of took me by surprise, and I thought, oh, this is going to be really cool. This is going to be, yeah, I was genuinely quite excited by it, even though it's just being a re-release of old live recordings. And yeah, I've really enjoyed listening to them. It's the era of Quo that I grew up on. So that, yeah, the Matt Letley era, sort of live in the sort of mid to late 2000s. It's the era of Quo that I love and sort of who I first fell in love with seeing live. And yeah, I've really liked them. I think it's a period when they were on top form, where the live recordings really do justice to to the power and energy that their shows had back then. That's not to say they don't now, but of course the band are different because they've got two different members. Three of the members are significantly older, so they're going to sound different now. But that period, the band were incredible, really, really tight. And yeah, I think it's a nice series. I think it's a nice series to do. The mixes of them have been pretty good. I've quite liked them. I know there's been a little bit of criticism around, I think, the guitars being the wrong side, Francis being the pan to the right. I don't know. That I'm not too bothered by that, really. People sort of pick up on that. I didn't really pick up on that. I think they sound great. The keyboards are a lot higher in all the mixes as well, which I particularly enjoy because I love hearing the keyboards. Both sort of the piano itself and the organ and the various other sounds that Andy has. So yeah, I think it's been a really nice project. I know it's sort of essentially ear music, sort of trying to exploit the part of the catalog that they have and sort of make it work. But I think it's nice. I think it's a nice sort of celebratory thing. It's not sort of, they're not amateur recordings. They're not sort of like sort of typically what people know as a bootleg. They are actually proper recordings that have been mixed, to the highest of standards. And yeah, it does justice to that era of Quo. So I've really enjoyed listening to them.
Do you think that now the end of touring appears to have happened, do you think there will be more product? I mean, there's the Cherry Red release in late November, obviously more archive series, as you say. Do you think that's probably going to step up a gear a little bit?
Perhaps it's hard to tell. I mean, firstly, I don't really know what's out there that's available to be released that hasn't been already. I know sort of every artist goes through, sort of that archive phase of, having sort of stuff re-churned out there and just, chucking whatever out there for the sake of a quick buck. Certainly on the record label's part, anyway. But I'm not really sure what else. Like, I couldn't name anything that I'd love to be released, or re-released, or have sort of any of these expanding editions. I mean, I'm sure some fans are aware of sort of the entire recording catalogs and demos and XYZ. There's nothing particularly that I'd sort of love to hear. I mean, the thing was with the Quo. I mean, yeah, this new release, I think the Drive Into Glory with that's on, yeah, as you say, Cherry Red Records. That seems a bit random. I'm not quite sure what the connection there is, but yeah, of course, the Quo's kind of catalog is split between Universal and Ear Music. Sort of Universal have kind of gone quiet since the Heavy Traffic and Riffs deluxe editions. And sort of over the last, I don't know, was it 2014 or 15 they started doing deluxe edition releases, and they sort of went through their catalog and did that. So I feel like now that's wrapped up. I'm not sure what else there is for them to do. I'm sure there are opportunities, but I'm not quite sure who instigates that, whether it's sort of, Francis and, sort of instigates that with the record label, or sort of takes things to them, or whether they sort of dig through the archives. We're under no illusion that Quo's, the value in their archive isn't that of the Beatles or of the Rolling Stones or of many other bands. And I'm sure, ultimately these products do need to make money. They do, they're commercial products, right? So as much as we'd love to sort of hear everything and have all these various releases, like, I think the record label needs to assess where the demand is, and yeah, what product is viable to release, really. So perhaps there will be, but at the same time, I wouldn't be surprised if sort of Quo things ever so slightly fade away, but you never know. I may be wrong there.
I don't think they'll fade away. They will not fade away. Yeah, so Break the Rules. Where can we find out more information about upcoming gigs and stuff?
So this is where I'd love to read out breaktherules.com for all the dates, but we haven't got a website. It's been on my to-do list for about the last, since we formed about 2 years ago. We have a Facebook page, we have an Instagram page, we've all got our own accounts as well, and yeah, we're all quite on the ball with sharing everything that's relevant. So yeah, head to our Facebook and Instagram, give us a like, follow, etc. And yeah, all the info for the Swindon gigs on there, and ticket links, and also any future announcements for next year. I believe a few things may have been announced, but yeah, we'll be ramping up sort of all of the promotion for that, so you'll be able to see all the gigs and everything that we've got planned for next year. Which we're looking forward to. And the Quovention, of course, that's sort of the first. Well, that is the first gig in our diaries for next year. So that'd be a good first gig for us to work towards.
Indeed. Well, thank you very much, Aidan, for being on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me back, Jamie. Any opportunity to talk about Quo?